What are the biggest questions facing the Chiefs and Eagles after Super Bowl 57 pertaining to fantasy football? It's time to break down the offseason and potential scoring of Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes in 2023 here on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinny Ireland, and after this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. Speaking of the NFL, recovering from a fantastic Super Bowl 57 in Arizona. We took Monday off because I was shuttling back for Sporting News from Phoenix back to Charlotte. So good stuff to take in. 13th Super Bowl for me, and getting a chance to watch that thriller between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts was fantastic, and we love the scoring from a fantasy football perspective. Now, it was looking good for the Eagles, up 24-14 at halftime, but we know Patrick Mahomes is at his best when he's down, and we saw that there. So, quick recap of the game. Mahomes was awesome. Jalen Hurts was awesome, except for that one fumble that was unforced there in the first half. Unfortunately, that made the difference in a three-point game. But these guys went back and forth, running, passing, either side. They made the plays. They lived up to expectations there. The defenses did not, and that's good because hopefully going forward we'll have those higher scoring Super Bowls. Last year was a little bit defensive-minded with Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and the Rams, but now we're in good shape here with offense winning championships. So congratulations to the Chiefs for winning their second ring with Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes named MVP for the second time in the Super Bowl in 3 appearances. The one lost to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. We know that's not going to happen again because Brady's retired. So great performance there for Mahomes. Didn't push for 200 yards, but that was the only disappointment. Everything else, he came through with the 3 touchdowns, good running in the game as well. And Hurts, you can't say enough about what he did running and passing. So the best MVP performance by a losing player for sure by Jalen Hurts. Even with that fumble, he was fantastic, including the good old octopus, the touchdown and the 2-point conversion there to tie the game at 35, answering when the Chiefs had all the momentum. So we'll talk more about their prospects here for 2023 later in the show. We're going to do it this way. We're going to break down what's happening with the Chiefs and Eagles in this offseason, things right away that they're concerned about position-wise and free agency, what they might look to do in the draft with the final 2 picks, as well as the Eagles have that extra pick early. So a lot of good stuff to break down. We'll do that for you. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com, Locked On today to get started. That's FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And we'll have a look at the Super Bowl futures. We'll do that on the next show on Wednesday. So I took Monday off. We got to dive in and flip the page from the end of the 2022/23 season to 23-24. And let's start with the Chiefs, shall we? The Super Bowl champions here. And looking at their biggest free agent concern right now is definitely their offensive tackles. It's not just Orlando Brown Jr., who's fantastic. And he has been very good and held up well in pass protection in the Super Bowl. Andrew Wiley also was very good, and he is a free agent. So they're 2 starting offensive tackles. They're fine in the middle with their combination of Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. But this is the concern here immediately for the Chiefs. What do they do here up front? I think they'll try to re-sign Orlando Brown. This team is in pretty good shape salary cap-wise. I think they'll create some and move some money around here. So I think they'll do everything they can to bring back Brown. I think they could move on from Wiley and look potentially in a different direction. They do have the draft pick, so maybe look at a rookie there. Definitely worked out with Humphrey and Smith, and dressing the interior with rookies has really paid off big time. Those guys have been fantastic. So we'll see if Brown and Wiley, they can keep them together. Ideally, that's what you want, cohesiveness in front of Patrick Mahomes and for the Chiefs' run blocking. They were outstanding. I mean, when you face a defense that had 70 sacks in the regular season, it wasn't just Mahomes getting the ball quickly. These guys dominated and did not get Mahomes hurt or touched at all in this game. And then look at their run blocking. They did stick with the run. That's why the Chiefs were able to win. That was the biggest key, I think, beyond the way they came back with Mahomes. So they stuck with the run. They didn't abandon it. They were very effective running. So that's another reason you want to keep Brown and Wiley intact there with those other three guys. So they'll do their best. If they move on from Wiley, they'll do that. Nick Allegretti is also a free agent, so might need to reshuffle things up front a little bit with their depth. And Lucas Niang has been okay, but I think they'd prefer to have Wiley now in that spot as he started the Super Bowl and for all the season here opposite Brown. So that's the number one priority, getting that protection short up from Mahomes so you can put up those numbers, continue to build on this Super Bowl dynasty of 2 rings in 4 years. All right, in the backfield, Jerick McKinnon, great season for him as that receiving back. He also made a brilliant decision in the Super Bowl by taking a knee. I know a lot of people were upset about that, looking for a Jerick McKinnon touchdown, but we knew it was going to be tough to come by in the Super Bowl, but he almost had it, but he made the smart football play to win the game. They did win as they ticked down the clock to 11 seconds and had Harrison Butker make the game-winning field goal. But, man, you wanted McKinnon to slide in if you had him for an anytime touchdown. There, it just didn't happen. So now we'll see what they do with him. Isaiah Pacheco flashed a little bit as a receiver late in the season, so that could be something they consider. Do they want to put a feature-like role on Pacheco? Do they think he is a little bit like Kareem Hunt was for Andy Reid or Jamal Charles? Do they think he can hold up that way? He's a different type of back. We know those guys were more scat backy. You can even go back to Brian Westbrook being a key runner in Philadelphia for Andy Reid. So different style of runner Pacheco is, but he has shown that he can catch the ball. He's a very powerful, explosive guy. Do they put a big load on him and say, okay, you're going to be 20 touchback next year? So something to weigh. McKinnon has had a lot of injury issues, has fought to have a key role in this team. It won't be very expensive to bring him back, but something we're going to watch. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's also interesting. He ended up being inactive for the Super Bowl, battled injuries, and having Pacheco and McKinnon kind of overtake the backfield. So we'll see how it plays out. They could try to incorporate Edwards-Helaire more as a receiver, but we haven't seen that. I thought that was the biggest reason why they drafted him in the first round in 2020, but that's not how they used him all that much. So do they need McKinnon as that change of pace receiver still with his veteran experience? He fits in really well with the guys, good locker room guy as well with his experience. So we'll see what they do there. But Pacheco could end up having a big, big role and be a very reliable RB2, especially with Ronald Jones also be a free agent. He hasn't done much. Melvin Gordon, by the way, also won a Super Bowl ring. So Ronald Jones is actually a 2-time Super Bowl winner because he won with the Bucs against the Chiefs. Now he gets another one here, and then you look at Melvin Gordon. He's assigned for depth, and he gets a Super Bowl ring. Go figure. He played for the Chargers and Broncos, 2 other teams in the division, and he ends up with a ring here as a non-active player. So interesting there with his backfield, but we'll watch Pacheco. I hope they give the ball more. One thing that I learned about Super Bowl week there with Andy Reid, he kept talking about Pacheco. That guy keeps impressing Andy Reid. So I think he could buy into him as being a feature back here in 2023. All right, quarterback, you're going to have to come up with a different insurance policy because Chad Henne decided to retire, beer in hand, on the field at Super Bowl 57. I actually did talk to Chad Henne for a while. Interesting to see what his plans are. Could he be the Chiefs' next offensive assistant that comes along? He doesn't know because he's telling me that, look, it's long hours. It's a lot to do. You just have that grind of being a coach. You almost have to work harder than he was as a backup quarterback doing that because he's got to work with Mahomes, be in the quarterback room, do all that extra time preparation. So I'm not sure if that's where Chad Henne wants to go. He also talked a little bit about TV. Pretty well-spoken guy. Would fit really well on TV, but I think he's going to take some time off away from the game. So interesting that he did also tell me that Mike Kafka was going to be a very good NFL coach wherever that happens. It may not happen this year in Arizona, but looking at Chad Henne, Godspeed to him. Good career for sure as a backup out of Michigan, the star quarterback there with the Wolverines, and had a nice career together and now has a couple Super Bowl rings as the guy behind Patrick Mahomes. Speaking of the guy behind Patrick Mahomes, you also have a concern about Shane Buechele. Is he the guy? He was another baseball player's son related to the Rangers. That's interesting, and also played college football in the state of Texas for the Texas Longhorns. And look at Buechele. I think he has some upside, but again, I think they're going to have to find a veteran quarterback there to back up one Patrick Mahomes. Maybe they bring on Gardner Minshew. He's on the other side from the Super Bowl against the Eagles. So we'll see. But their backup has to be a little bit better. Chad Henne was a great plug and play, really helped these guys come along. We saw it there in a super sub role. So again, they'll need someone who handles the offense pretty well and can make the most of the offensive skill players when Mahomes is not in the game. We hope that's not much or at all going forward after we've already had that scare with his knee and ankle here the past few seasons. Juju Smith-Schuster is a free agent at wide receiver. So is Mecole Hardman. So Juju got that bonus for winning the Super Bowl, $1 million bonus, doubled his salary. They brought him on a flyer. Are they going to keep him as a veteran? They do have Marcus Valdes-Scantling under contract for more than a year after they signed him for agency. They also had Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore make some plays in the Super Bowl. So we'll see what they do there. Juju, I think they'll try to bring him back because he was so cheap, and I don't think they'll have to break the bank to get him. Now, Mecole Hardman's a different story. He was injured a lot of last season. His return role was okay, but you do have Sky Moore. You do have Toney. These are similar players. You need to carry Hardman. They do like Hardman as a featured guy in the offense. They really respect what he can do, but overall, I think it's a tough spot here with that to say you want to bring back Hardman. Justin Watson, they could also let him walk as a free agent, look for another big play threat to help Marcus Valdes-Scantling. But looking at Juju, I think he's going to come back. I don't think you'll see Hardman back. Now, at tight end, they have Blake Bell and Jody Fortson. They're both free agents, so you could see a lot more Noah Gray used in the offense. He had a catch early in the Super Bowl there to help Travis Kelce. So again, Noah Gray, I'd like to see more opportunities. A notable defensive free agent for the Chiefs is Juan Thornhill. So we'll see what happens with Juan Thornhill. It's going to be a key loss there because he's their safety that they trust the most in a young secondary. So that's something you look at. They also have several older defensive linemen, Derek Nadi, Kellen Saunders. They need to navigate through those potential free agencies. But again, this young secondary youth movement is on with the defense for the Chiefs. And maybe it's on with the offense with Moore and Toney being a big part of that going forward for Mahomes. All right, there you have it. There's a look at the Chiefs offseason preview after Super Bowl 57. What is on their mind most here to try to get back to the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas against another team here, potentially the Eagles again. We'll talk about the Eagles and what their offseason outlook is here on Locked On Fantasy Football in the next segment. Then we'll have a little bit of fun debating the top of the quarterback rankings in 2023. That's all to come here on Locked On Fantasy Football. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And if you haven't given online therapy a try, BetterHelp is for you. They're going to make it easy for you to find the roadmap you need, the user's manual you need for your life. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes get life into a bog down. You might feel overwhelmed, or you're not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you. And BetterHelp is going to get you there with the right help that you need, and all online for you. So can't be any easier than that to get started on therapy, because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything that life throws at you. And I've been a big advocate of therapy. I go to a therapist regularly myself, and it really helps me kind of guide me through what I need to do. And if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option for you. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockdown today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp. That's HELP.com/lockdown, and get the help you need there. And we really thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this show. All right, it is time to continue the show here, breaking down what we have with the Eagles free agents here in 2023. So let's break that down for you. All right, it's top of mind here. Gardner Minshew, we talked about him a little bit. We'll see if they bring him back behind Jalen Hurts. He did fill in a couple games. They did lose both of those games. But Minshew seems to know the offense. He's a smart guy, trusted guy behind Hurts. So they'll try to bring him back on the cheap, or he might explore some of these starting options elsewhere. So something to watch there. The backfield question is the biggest one. You have Miles Sanders and Boston Scott are both free agents. So big potential for Kenneth Gainwell to take over this backfield. Miles Sanders had an okay Super Bowl, ran hard. I don't think the Eagles ran the ball enough effectively in the game. Sanders got hurt early, a little bit banged up. We go to the medical tent. There we saw Gainwell get a touchdown that was ruled short of the end zone. Jalen Hurts popped that in. So Gainwell can do a little bit of everything. He's a good power runner inside the red zone. He's a good receiver. We know that. He was the better receiver than Sanders, and really Scott was not much of a factor. Scott was at one point with the Saints as kind of that Sproles role guy, but he's just kind of a smaller, compact power back at this point. So I don't think Scott will be back. Sanders is a bit iffy here. I mean, the Eagles need to make some sacrifices when you have some depth with Gainwell. They could also look at a rookie back and add some cheapness there behind their offensive line. They can run with pretty much anyone with those five guys up front. So something to keep in mind there. So Sanders, I think there's a good chance he is allowed to walk here. I think they'd like to keep him, but he has to be at a reasonable contract here because Gainwell is waiting the wings, and they would be fine giving him 15 touches per game and just complimenting him with a different back that isn't Scott or Sanders here going forward. So really the Eagles backfield number one in question. A wide receiver, Zach Pascal, is their only free agent. I expect him to move on. We know that Frank Reich just took a new job with the Panthers, so it could be a reunion for him there with the Colts situation in mind. So Zach Pascal did actually make an appearance and make a catch in the Super Bowl. They threw a little bit to those extra guys. They targeted Quez Watkins. They looked at Zach Pascal. So those are the guys who were a little bit involved, but we know this was the A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith show, and everyone else is after that. They're making plays, starting with Dallas Goedert. So Zach Pascal probably moving on here. Behind Dallas Goedert, they have Tyree Jackson. He's that converted quarterback from college, intriguing athlete, but not going to have a big role in this offense. Jack Stoll is the number 2 tight end, the one that they use in 12 personnel. Defensively is where the Eagles' biggest questions lie here for sure. You look at every level of their defense, starting right in the middle with Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. They also picked up Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph to help their run defense in the middle of the season. Those guys are old and also free agents, so keep in mind all these guys on the other side, 30. Cox is 32. Hargrave is 30, just turned 30. You know, Ndamukong Suh, 36, and Linval Joseph, 34. They did have Jordan Davis, the first-round pick from 2022, following the championship run of the Georgia Bulldogs. So he's a big beast up front, but he's a run stopper. But do they keep Hargrave or Cox? I think they would lean toward Hargrave. Cox kind of faded a little bit. So I think Fletcher Cox might be done with Philadelphia here. A good career for sure, but I think the Eagles would move on and prioritize Hargrave, given his sack production and having his career year inside. So Hargrave over Cox is probably going to be a decision, and I don't see Suh or Joseph returning here. They were just plug and plays, and I think you'll see the potential of the Eagles looking at defensive tackle again in the draft to help Jordan Davis come along. So definitely think that's where they're going to go. Davis and Hargrave as your starters there. Now, also free agents on the outside, Robert Quinn and Brandon Graham. Quinn was more a rotational guy behind Graham and Josh Sweat. So we'll see what happens there. But this pass rush is going to be broken up a little bit. They're going to lose some pop somewhere or another. So when you're looking at Graham, we'll see if he returns. He's 34. Robert Quinn is 32. These guys are getting pretty old and really both creeping towards a year older here. So a lot of age in this Eagles defensive line rotation that they're going to concern themselves with. But when you look at it, Hargrave and Graham come off career years. I think they want to keep these guys at least for one more year to make a shot at the Super Bowl, with Jalen Hurts still working on his rookie contract. That's going to transition here pretty soon because he doesn't have a fifth-year option. So that's going to handcuff them a little bit with a lot of these moves. James Bradbury, the infamous James Bradbury from the Super Bowl, the holding call against Juju Smith-Schuster. He had an earlier pass interference that wasn't called, but the right call was made on Bradbury. He said he made the mistake. He tried to keep Juju out of the end zone, who would have scored. So Bradbury, again, made that mistake. Maybe he should have let Juju score in that situation based on the way it ended here. But Bradbury didn't really do a lot of penalty stuff in the regular season. So that's something to look at. So that is a concern. They could also address this position opposite Darius Slay, who's still playing at a very high level at his age, above 30 as well. Bradbury, by the way, will be 30 in the regular season here, so they could move on and look at Keely Ringo of Georgia, or Cam Smith of South Carolina. These are the two top corners in any order that you are looking at in the 2023 draft. Now, offensive line, we know Jason Kelce has a big decision to make. He says he's going to make the decision before the new league year starts, and it's March 15th. So the Ides of March is where Jason Kelce is looking at here. He's 35. He's played in 2 Super Bowls, already won 1. I think it would be hard for him to walk away if they lost, and he hadn't had that previous one from Super Bowl 52. But maybe have only one Kelce brother in their family. It really could happen here. Just had the family expand here, so I don't know if we'll see Jason Kelce play again for the Eagles. That would be a big loss, of course, because that would break up the offensive line, the anchor of that for so many years. They have to look for some help there. No other offensive line concerns there. Jordan Mailata at left. Tackle's okay. Isaac Samalu, they could replace him pretty well. He's getting a bit older as well. So I could see Samalu walking, Kelce retiring, and then they were going to have to find some answers inside. Here, Andre Dillard, promising start, but he's not going to be a guy that they're going to trust at the tackle either. So we'll see if that Eagles offensive line stays intact or if there's some big changes here coming in. I think ideally they would want to keep it with Mailata and some of the younger guys that they have up front. It is the league's best offensive line, but Kelce moving on would make them look for a center for sure, and we'll see if Samalu, that would prompt them to keep him there as part of their offensive line. Now, elsewhere defensively, Kazir White and TJ Edwards, they're 2 linebackers that are not Hassan Reddick rushing off the edge, are also free agents. So somebody out there, linebacker could also be a high priority for the Eagles. So a lot of defensive question marks when you get past Sanders, the backfield, and what we're going to do with Kelce and the offensive line. So Eagles may be a completely different team here. A lot of free agent concerns, tough cap situation. They also have to think about clearing some room with Hurts being a free agent soon and going into a year where they're going to have to re-sign him. And they can defer it a little bit like the Bills did with Josh Allen. But again, they have to think about the future and cannot carry some of these heavy contracts there to be cap compliant. So you can see the Eagles changing things up, and we saw how different they were. Only 8 guys remained from Super Bowl 52 that played in Super Bowl 57. So we could see another cycle here. But Jalen Hurts, again, he's the guy that we're focused on, and hopefully bigger and better things or just as good things are coming from Jalen Hurts. We'd be happy about that in reality and fantasy. Looking for delicious treat, but don't roll all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and now Super Bowl Sunday. That's a big day with all the partying. I know my goal is to become a little bit healthier this off season. If you're like me, or you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors such as churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar. That's right. And they also have an amazing set of macros. What's even better, they're all healthy for you. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein you'll find in most Built Bars. Now, you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, even better, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box that includes flavors such as brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. And check it out, Built Bar, available at Built.com, as well as now Walmart and your local Sam's Club. All right, it is time to close the show here, Locked On Fantasy Football. We're going to have some fun. Now, we know what's ahead around Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. How do the fantasy football rankings stack up at quarterback early for 2023? Now, Josh Allen has been the consensus. He's the other guy that would leave the clubhouse here going into the offseason. You have Joe Burrow and, of course, Justin Herbert in that Kellen Moore offense now that can bump up his production. We've seen Dak Prescott put some big numbers up in that offense as an all-around athletic big quarterback with a strong arm. So that could be really great for Herbert. Joe Burrow playing for that contract should have a big year again throwing the ball. We know he has a little bit of mobility, can score touchdowns that way as well. So give Allen Burrow and Herbert, but I still think it's going to come down between Hurts and Mahomes for the highest scoring quarterback. Now, Mahomes led the league in passing yardage and passing touchdown. Jalen Hurts, of course, was the force on the ground as well as putting up some big numbers through the air. The best dual threat quarterback now in the league has taken over that mantle from many others. So Hurts versus Mahomes, I'm going Hurts. I think things are just too good for Hurts right now. The offensive line, the weaponry, the running. I think the running just separates Jalen Hurts from everybody. I think he's the best of both worlds, where I think he can be a 30 and 15 guy, so 30 through the air, 15 on the ground, where it's pretty consistent. Josh Allen, a little bit of a wild horse there that goes up and down, erratic. I know Allen gets a lot more rushing yards, but Hurts is an easy money guy in the red zone for rushing touchdowns. He also has the big playability. I think he'll even be more settled with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, and they'll get even more wide receiver pop here. So I also think the Eagles' schedule won't be as favorable. So you'll see a little bit of John Hurts through the air and on the ground be very productive this year. So it's funny, like their schedule was pretty favorable, but you want it to be a little tougher, so they have to throw a little bit more and not rely on their defense. And the defense, as we just mentioned, could lose a lot of key elements here. So again, it's pretty close, but Hurts, based on fantasy football scoring, because of the potential of 4-yard passing touchdowns versus 6-yard rushing touchdowns, and the way sometimes yardage is calculated, where it's 25 yards passing for a point and 10 yards rushing only. Jalen Hurts can be the great equalizer there on the ground through the air with all those touchdowns. So I'm going with Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes here as the top quarterback, and I'm going to put Josh Allen third. Sorry, I think he's going to have a bit of a drop-off year. Some things may be lost around him. And this Brian Dable offense was great, but definitely drop off with Ken Dorsey. So we'll see what happens here with Allen. So I think the arrow points up a little bit for Herbert, a little bit static for Burrow, Allen a little bit down, but Hurts and Mahomes still way up and separating here from the rest of the pack. Again, Hurts is running and scoring on the ground is what makes him better than Allen. I think he can also put up better passing numbers than Allen to rival behind Mahomes. Now, there's 3 sleeper quarterbacks that could disrupt all this. Here are 3. One is Lamar Jackson. If he's back with the Ravens or finds himself with the Falcons or something like that, where he's going to be the focal point running the football, throwing downfield, watch out for Lamar Jackson having a big rebound season if healthy. Deshaun Watson, remember when he was with the Texans, he was consistently a top 5, top 6 fantasy football quarterback. He's in the mix. The weapons are pretty decent with Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Njoku. They could get a little bit more contributions from younger receivers here. And Watson, of course, the running ability gives him a little padded stat avenue here. So something to look at. And then finally, Aaron Rodgers. I don't like Aaron Rodgers to be the number 1 fantasy quarterback if he stays in Green Bay. But if he goes to the Jets, all of a sudden what you're looking at, Garrett Wilson, you got Elijah Moore. You got Breece Hall's a great receiver. I think they would upgrade more at wide receiver here beyond that. They have Corey Davis if they need to fall back on that. They have C.J. Uzomah and Tyler Conklin. This team is loaded with skill players that can find the end zone here if they had a more competent quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers could be that solution. So if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, I like it. If Aaron Rodgers goes to the Raiders, there's a potential there, because he's got Devontae Adams back. He's got Darren Waller that can still play. And you also have Josh Jacobs potentially returning to that backfield, a key element out of the backfield catching passes. Of course, they could look to replace Mac Hollins with a bigger threat on the outside, but they also have Hunter Renfrow. So a lot of reliable receivers for the Jets and Raiders, now more so for better source of production for Rodgers than he has in Green Bay. So he's the sleeper. But I think the chalk goes Hurts, Mahomes, Allen there for your fantasy football early rankings at quarterback in 2023. Then round it out with Herbert. I'm going with him next, then Burrow, then Jackson, then Watson, then Rodgers. That's how I break it down here. And I'm basing a little bit also on the fact that Rodgers is going to move on from Green Bay. I think that's going to help him get back into that strong QB1 status. So all these guys would be QB1s we talked about. So this would be QBs 1 through 8 that you're looking at in 2023. We'll have a lot more looking at the quarterback rankings. There'll be updates all through the offseason with the industry's thinking consensus-wise across position. We'll check in with those all offseason long. We'll also look at every team. This is just the scratch of the surface here with the Eagles and Chiefs and their offseason. So just want to get them on the board after Super Bowl 57. Great game, great teams, and we'll see how much impact they can be in 2023. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms, and I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time looking at the Super Bowl 58 odds across the NFL and see where the best values are among the teams there.